The house never felt empty, not really. When Sarah unlocked the door that first night, arms straining with moving boxes, the air inside pressed against her chest like she was intruding on someone else's space. She told herself it was just the weight of the long day, the dust clinging to the walls, the unfamiliar creak of wood swollen with summer heat. But even then, something about the silence unsettled her. It wasn't still. It listened. By midnight, with boxes stacked high and exhaustion dragging at her bones, Sarah lay awake in her new bedroom. The walls groaned like old lungs, and the faint smell of mildew drifted from the closet. She closed her eyes, trying to ignore it. That was when she heard the first whisper. Faint. Just a breath. But it carried her name. Sarah. She bolted upright, heart thundering. The room was empty. The shadows were just shadows. She laughed nervously to herself and shook her head. New house, old pipes. Nothing more. But when she lay back down, her pillow was damp, as if someone else's head had been resting there before her. By the third night, the house had started to change her routines. The living room chair, the heavy oak one she had dragged from her parents' attic, kept moving. Always just slightly. She'd leave it angled toward the window, only to return and find it turned toward the hallway. Once, she found it facing the couch, as though someone had been watching her sleep there. Sarah tried to ignore it, told herself she must have bumped it without realizing. But one morning, she left for work with the chair against the wall, and when she returned, it was in the middle of the room, blocking her path. She stood in the doorway for a long time, the keys still in her hand. A draft brushed her neck, warm, humid, like a breath. She didn't sleep in the living room after that. The smell was the worst. At first it was faint, like damp soil. But soon, it clung to the air, a sweet, rotting stench that seemed to seep from nowhere and everywhere at once. Sarah scrubbed the floors, the drains, the trash bins. She lit candles until the wax ran down in rivers. Nothing worked. The smell followed her into the bedroom, thickest at night, curling around her as she lay in bed. Sometimes, in the dark, she thought she could hear it moving, like wet cloth dragging across the floorboards. And one night, when she reached to turn on the lamp, a cold hand brushed hers in the dark. The light snapped on. No one was there. But on the lamp's base, smeared across the brass, was a streak of something black and foul. She stopped telling people about it after the third time her friend laughed. New house nerves, they said. Your brain fills in blanks. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. The voice had grown bold now. It didn't just whisper her name, it spoke in fragments, in broken phrases that chilled her blood. Don't leave. Stay with me. Downstairs. She tried not to listen, but the voice grew louder when she ignored it, swelling in the silence of the house until it filled every corner. And sometimes, it wasn't one voice. Sometimes it was two, or three, murmuring together just beyond her door, as though the house itself was crowded with unseen guests. It started with the mirror in the upstairs hallway. Sarah was hurrying past it one morning, late for work, when her breath caught in her throat. For the briefest instant, her reflection didn't move with her. It lingered a heartbeat behind, watching, eyes darker than hers. She froze, staring into the glass. Her reflection stared back, perfectly in sync now. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe her exhaustion was playing tricks. But when she leaned closer, something else leaned forward behind her. A pale shape, taller than her, eyeless, its mouth split impossibly wide. She spun around. The hallway was empty. When she looked back, the mirror only showed herself, pale and trembling. That night, Sarah locked every door and window. She lined the thresholds with salt, something she vaguely remembered from old ghost stories. She fell asleep clutching a kitchen knife. She woke to the sound of soft tapping. Her bedroom window was smeared with handprints, dozens of them. Not pressed from the outside, but from within. Small, gray prints, some with long thin fingers, others smudged and broken, like the hands of things that weren't quite human. Sarah screamed, stumbling back, nearly tripping over the nightstand. The prints were still wet, glistening as though the things had only just pulled their hands away. When she blinked, they were gone. The glass shone clean in the moonlight. But the smell of rot was back, stronger than ever. Sarah stopped using the living room. She stopped going upstairs after dark. But the house seemed to shrink around her, forcing her into corners, whispering from the walls. One night she found herself standing outside the basement door without remembering how she'd gotten there. The wood was cold against her palm, and from behind it came a slow, wet sound. Breathing. Her own lungs froze. She pressed her ear to the door. The breathing grew louder, rasping, gurgling, like air bubbling through water. And then, in a low voice right against the wood. "Come down." Sarah stumbled back, nearly falling. The basement door rattled as if something had slammed against it from the other side. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. She ran, not stopping until she was outside, barefoot in the wet grass, staring at the house as though it were something alive and watching her. The lights in the upstairs hallway flickered on. One by one, the bulbs lit, moving slowly toward her bedroom. She tried to leave. Packed a bag, drove to her sister's place 2 towns over. But when she pulled into the driveway, the house was already there. Her house. Sitting where her sister should have been. Same peeling paint, same narrow windows glowing faintly with light. Sarah sat behind the wheel, numb, the engine humming. When she blinked, the house was gone, replaced by the familiar suburban ranch her sister owned. She didn't go inside. She drove back, heart hammering, only to find her own house waiting for her, quiet and patient. That night, she didn't dare close her eyes. But exhaustion took her anyway. When she woke, it was there. A figure at the foot of her bed. Not moving. Not breathing. Just watching. Her throat locked. She couldn't scream. The air felt heavy, pressing down on her chest, pinning her to the mattress. The figure leaned closer, until she could hear it whisper in her ear. "You see me now." Sarah couldn't run anymore. Everywhere she went, the house followed. Its shadows crawled behind her eyelids, its smell clung to her hair and skin. When she turned away from mirrors, she felt her reflection still watching, grinning hungrily. And now, the whispers weren't just in the walls, they were in her head. "Downstairs. Come downstairs." She fought it for as long as she could. But on the 3rd night without sleep, she found herself gripping the basement doorknob. Her hand shook. The wood pulsed faintly under her fingers, like a heartbeat. When she opened the door, a rush of air spilled out, thick, wet, almost alive. The stairs stretched downward into perfect black. "Sarah." The voice slid through the dark, sharp as broken glass. "You're home." She stepped down. The basement smelled like graves. Damp, sweet rot mixed with rust and something sour, like spoiled milk. Her phone light barely cut through the dark, but the moment it flicked on, she wished it hadn't. The walls were wet. The concrete glistened with a slick, black sheen, as though the house itself was bleeding. And there, at the far end, something shifted. It wasn't a figure. Not at first. Just a darker shape in the dark, rising and unfolding, taller than the ceiling should allow. Her phone light wavered across it, and landed on a face. Or what had once been a face. Skin stretched too tight, mouth torn ear to ear, eyes hollow pits that sucked the light in. Its chest heaved, wheezing, and the sound wasn't air but water bubbling in a clogged drain. Sarah stumbled back, but the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. The thing moved closer, its body breaking the rules of shape and space, folding and unfolding in ways her eyes couldn't follow. "Stay," it whispered, in her own voice. She bolted up the stairs, slamming her fists against the locked door, screaming until her throat tore raw. Cold hands slid around her ankles. She looked down and saw pale arms snaking up the steps, too many arms, all of them ending in long, wet fingers. They clawed at her legs, pulling, dragging. "No, no!" Sarah kicked, sobbing, nails breaking as she clawed at the door. The wood beneath her hands softened. It wasn't wood anymore. It was flesh, warm, pulsing, slick with blood. Her stomach lurched as the whole house seemed to shudder and breathe. The door melted away, swallowing her wrists. And in the dark below, the thing laughed. Sarah's phone tumbled from her grip. The screen cracked, but the light still glowed faintly on the stairs. In that pale beam, she saw the truth. The walls weren't walls. They were lined with faces, dozens, maybe hundreds, pressed into the flesh of the house itself. Eyes rolled weakly, mouths open and closed in silent screams. Some she recognized. Her neighbor. The mailman. A woman from the grocery store. The house hadn't been haunted. It was the ghost. And it wanted her inside. Hands dragged her down the steps. The last thing Sarah saw before the light went out was her own reflection in the cracked phone screen, smiling, even as she screamed. Weeks later, the house went up for sale again. The real estate agent walked through briskly, clipboard in hand. Nice neighborhood. Good bones. Just needed a little work. He paused in the living room, frowning. Had that chair always been facing the hallway? A faint smell drifted through the air, sweet, rotten, almost like damp soil. He wrinkled his nose and moved on. The house listened. Patient. Waiting.